Everybody's doing great, and I hope that we can have a interesting discussion. I'll be honest, there's a lot on my mind, and I was toying the last hour and a half, what subject to go on. And I think I'm going to go on a subject that, superficially, you might sit there saying, gosh, why is he going there? It's so irrelevant to our lives. But I hope that if we explore the concept and the theory together, that we'll actually walk out with clarity in our lives. So just bear with me. Thanks. Okay. The concept I want to talk today about is free speech. Now, you might be wondering if you walked into a political class. You didn't. But bear with me. You might have seen that many Jews around the world, or many supporters, are going on a 2-day boycott of technology, whether they're boycotting Twitter for allowing anti-Semitism or boycotting Facebook. I just saw a few minutes ago a letter that Chief Rabbi Mervis from England wrote to Zuckerberg, telling him why he's doing this 2-day blockout out of social media. And ultimately, what it's boiling down to is how free is one's speech? Because we all believe in democracy. We all believe that people should not live in a totalitarian regime like North Korea, or even a partially totalitarian like China. We believe in democracy. On the other hand, if you allow everybody to say anything they want, then you have absolute anarchy. I mean, Hitler said everything he wanted, and eventually 6 million Jews and millions of others were killed. Karl Marx was allowed to say everything he wanted, and then eventually the communists killed hundreds of millions of people. Just China alone, they killed 70 million people when they took over. Comrade Mao, Comrade Stalin, and Kim Jong-un, and God knows who else. So I was thinking to myself earlier today, you know, everybody sits there screaming free speech, and at the same time, everybody screams there's way too much anti-Semitism out there. Every rapper can now get up over there, and unfortunately, quite a few singers, especially rappers for some reason, the last few days, have said some really disgusting things about Jews, whether they're using the old anti-Semitic tropes, the Rothschilds, money, greed, controlling the world, protocols of elders of Zion, all the good old conspiracies. And everybody's screaming hell and high water, anti-Semitism. Then you have people who use the platform for racism. They'll say whatever, I hate the X, I hate people of this color, I hate people of this gender, I hate this people of this sexual orientation, I hate this, I hate that. Should you be allowed to say it? Now, as I said, you might be wondering, why is this relevant to you? So first of all, I do believe that political discussions are relevant, but I will try to make it more relevant in your home. And I'll do it like this. What conversations are tolerated in your home? What things can your children say, or husband, that are tolerated, and what aren't? Imagine your country, your home is your country. It's your universe. And everything within it is controlled by the mom in a healthy home. Or you and your husband together. What do you tolerate and what don't you? What's considered speech that's free and what's not? You see, because there's two sides of the equation. One side of the political equation screams free speech. Everything should be allowed. The other one screams political correctness, which is my feelings are being hurt when you call me that way. I expect you to talk to me this way. Don't call me male or female, call me this, call me that, etc. So one side of the equation is screaming that they should be able to and allowed to say anything they want. And one side is saying everything you say that doesn't fit my worldview is offensive, and I'm offended and I need to have a safe space for you. So what kind of home do you nurture? Do you nurture a home where kids have opinions, or do you nurture a home that kids have no opinions? Now, you might say it's not so black and white. So what is it? I've been introduced in my life to homes on both sides of the spectrum, homes where kids could say anything. They could talk with chutzpah to their parents. They can voice their opinions. They can be emotional and just slam doors because it's self-expression. It's absolute freedom of expression in there. And I've been in homes where you're not entitled to any opinions. Mom or dad, they're the policy of this home. Anything you go against them is offensive. You are offending them by not agreeing with every opinion they stand for. And therefore, they create a culture of conformity. Everybody has to conform to what mom and dad think. And if anybody goes out the way, whether they're boycotted or they're simply given a very cold shoulder, and it becomes very clear quickly, we don't like this stuff at home. We don't talk like that at home. So you might say it's a balance, which is the best answer for every question. Should you be ultra-religious or should you be secular? Rabbi, the answer is a balance. Now I know. So profound. Wow, I didn't think of it till now. But what is the balance? Is that like basically is if 1 is extreme and 100 is extreme, so is everything between 1 and 99 balance? So you didn't really give me a lot of answers because you pretty much took away 2 options and you left me with 98. What's balance? What you consider balance, do I consider balance? Is your balance my balance? Is your spouse's balance my balance? Or his or your balance? Is your child's balance your balance? So that there's certain things you say that are only the beginning of a conversation. They sound profound, but they actually don't answer anything. They just open a conversation. And one of them is balance. I remember I spent a year in Europe studying. And I one time had a Friday night meal with a very sweet family. Later they made Aliyah. And I remember sitting at the meal and there was another person there. And he turns to us youth. I was 20, 21. I was totally impressionable. He says, you know, I'm going to tell you something. He was Israeli. I'm going to tell you something. The answer to all world problems, all, balance. If we find balance, we find the truth. And I thought to myself, wow, that's profound. Woof. Then I wasn't being cynical. Now I am. Like, wow, that is so incredible. Wow. You know, coming straight out of yeshiva where nothing was balanced, everything was absolute hardcore, you know, black and white, literally in clothing and perspective and worldview and everything. So now I come to a world that's not exactly black and white. And this guy opens my mind to this deep, deep perspective. And that is the answer to everything is balance. So here's my point. My point is like this. Balance doesn't answer any questions. It just says that there's 98 options of balance. Just like when you say freedom of speech, and that's supposed to be an answer, it's not an answer, it's a beginning conversation. How far should it be free? What should it be? What shouldn't it be? So think about it. Think about it in a more specific way. Not it's a balance. Think about how you run your home. Well, I'd imagine, let's play, I'm not going to choose anyone specific. I'd imagine if you're a functional, decent home, there are certain things that are off limits. No cursing, no racism, no cursing out people for who they are, respect for parents, basic respect for one another, not obviously at the level of parents, but all siblings, a basic respect. Ability to ask questions to an extent until the questions make us uncomfortable. In other words, what we realize is that life is never black or white. And it's not balanced either, it's complex. I think it's a much better word than balance. It's complex. It's multifaceted. As much as I want my kids to develop themselves and develop their own voices, it comes within limits. You still won't scream at me as if I'm your garbage dump. I'm your parent. You're not going to talk to me like that. I won't allow my spouse to talk to me certain ways, and my spouse won't allow me to talk to her in certain ways. Not because we're being mean, we're setting boundaries. And when you set boundaries, you create an environment in which healthy conversation can work. So boundaries are not a curse. Boundaries allow everybody to know what we're dealing with. So you're asking, yeah, what's this rabbi? Where is he going? What does he want? What's the point? What's the punchline? Punchline is the following. We're in the 9 days right now. We're going 2 days from now. We're going into Tisha B'Av, Wednesday night. And we're going to mourn the Holy Temple. And we're told that the temple was destroyed from hatred because people didn't respect one another, because there was too much gossip, there was too much lushing, there was too much negativity, there wasn't enough positivity, we weren't getting along. And what's the answer to get along? In other words, you might say that the temple was destroyed when we abused free speech. See, because every privilege in life comes with a responsibility. If I give you free speech, you have to set the boundaries on it. In other words, society decides that they want to live with free speech. At the same time, society has to create boundaries for the free speech. Because if I'm giving you a liberty, if I'm giving you a freedom, if I'm giving you a gift, by definition, every gift needs to come with boundaries. Everything has to come with responsibility. It was, I believe, Viktor Frankl who said that if on the East Coast we have the Statue of Liberty, then on the West Coast we should have the Statue of Responsibility. Because you can't have liberty without responsibility. You can't have your kids free, independent, without them being responsible, right? You're not going to give your 14-year-old the car because it's freedom without responsibility. 14-year-olds don't have the maturity to be responsible with the car or with alcohol or with intimacy or with many other things that you're not going to allow them to, because you simply respect the fact you're 14. I'm not asking you to be super mature, but at this stage, I cannot give you liberty if you're not going to be responsible about it. Responsibility is the prerequisite for liberty. Now, where does responsibility come from? It can't come from government. It comes from faith. It comes from religion. It comes from morality. So maybe not necessarily religion, but it comes from moral communities, which very often are based around religion. So to create a healthy community, to create a healthy country, to create a healthy family, you could take it from the macro to the micro. It's irrelevant, because everything I'm saying right now, whether I use words like country or I use words like family, it's applicable to both. I don't really see the difference. One is micro, it's in tiny, and one's a macro and huge, but it's the same idea. And that is, if we give people liberty, they have to be responsible about it. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And responsibility only comes from a moral code where you have a sense of right or wrong. Otherwise, if the person does not have responsibility, what does society do? They put them in jail, right? Every single person is free to walk down the street and do whatever they want. But if you're walking down the street without responsibility, hence somebody knocks somebody over with a car, or they get in a rage and they kill somebody, or they do some other crime, you will pay the consequences because you weren't responsible. We gave you a lot of freedom, but beyond freedom, there is a set of responsibility. A society creates responsibility. Now, the government, or for that matter, even the parents as authority, they can only give a certain amount of boundaries, but at some stage, the boundaries have to be put by the kids themselves, by the society themselves. In other words, you create an environment in which people know what's right and what's wrong. And they live with it. One of the things that the Lubavitch Rebbe campaigned very strongly, you'll be surprised because it's not one of the Shabbos kosher etc. It was a campaign for a moment of silence in all public schools in the United States and around the world. Why did he believe so? He said, I know that we cannot push any specific religion, and better that way, because each school will have kids from multiple religions. And we don't even have to mention God. But every school day should start with 1 minute, a minute of silence, where everybody's quiet. They close their eyes, or they could keep their eyes open, but for 1 minute, they could think about the meaning of life. That's what they're encouraged to do, to think about life. If the child comes from a religious home, then they'll think about their religion. If not, they'll think about meaning. But at some stage, what it's going to do, it's going to make them reflective that life is responsibility and that there is a higher order. And for kids who do come from a religious or semi-religious background, it will just give them 1 minute a day at the beginning of the day to reflect that there is a creator and my actions have consequences. That's all he asked for. He said 1 minute. Many states have brought it in, but it's still not, hasn't permeated. Many people thought you have to separate religion and state, but the Rebbe said it wasn't religious. You could think during the minute whatever you want. 1 minute a day. Think about it. It sounds like a little, but if you sat down every single day and spent 1 minute thinking about the meaning of life, you could actually become, you and I could become much better people. A minute is very powerful. Because you cannot build a society just with freedom. You have to teach them responsibility. And again, responsibility comes with morals. Now you're going to sit there saying this famous argument, religion has caused many problems. Yes, I know. It's not religion that's caused problems, it's people that cause problems. When people forget what religion is here. Ultimately, religion is here for one purpose and one purpose only. To make people better people by making them closer to God and closer to their fellow human being. If somebody doesn't do that, then they're not religious. If your religion does not make you a better person, a more ethical person between you and yourself, or rather you could call it you and God, or you and yourself, and you and your fellow, then you are not religious, or you haven't understood religion. Religion is not about doctrine, and it's not about behavior. It's ultimately about teaching people that there is an eye that sees and an ear that hears, and that our lives have meaning and have consequences, and we're here for a reason, and that we are not just haphazard atoms flying around the world. There is a creator who put us here for a purpose. If the world can have that combined with liberty, then you flourish. You see, for most of history, there was lots of religion and no liberty. Then we achieve liberty and we drop religion, because that's the way the society always works. It's a pendulum. One extreme to the other, one to the other, one to the other. But truth is never on both extremes of the pendulum. It's somewhere in the middle, balance. And we have to find that. In other words, you can't have a society without religion. It's important. And you can't have a society without liberty. It's important. People need to have the freedom to choose. At the same time, they have to have the morality to help them choose. So you see, government, or for that matter, even parents, they are there to give the kids the freedom to choose their life. So that whether it's the government who has to make roads and do all their things to make sure that society works, whether it's parents that make sure that the kids have a house over their head, have a roof over their head, have a bed, have food. And then within that space that you're allowing people to be their own, now has to come part two, a guide. Otherwise, where do I go? Where do I turn? I love that word, the expression, the world is your oyster, my child. Basically, you have a gazillion options. I don't know if gazillion options is a gift or a curse. Gazillion options? Is that necessarily what I want in my life? I want clarity. What next? The world, you look at the world right now, it is so confused. Gosh, it's confused. But instead of people realizing maybe we need a better morality, no, it's again about politics. If we only went socialism, we would solve it. If we only went to communism, we would solve it. If we only became extremely liberal, if only we became extremely Republican, if we only became extremely conservative, if we only became authoritarian, if we only followed this, if we only did that, that would solve it. And people are misunderstanding. Liberty is important. The problem with America, or for that matter, South Africa, or for that matter, the West, is not that we have too much liberty. It's that we bankrupted the other part of it. And that is liberty comes with responsibility. Liberty comes with a moral code. If you take the moral code out of liberty, you have nothing. You have anarchy. And what's going on in the West right now, when you see what's going on in the streets of America, when you see what's going on in these streets here in South Africa, when you see what's going on all around the world, it's pure anarchy. And the totalitarians, whether it's Russia or China, they're sitting and laughing and saying, look, democracy doesn't work. See, we work because, the Chinese, they forced the Muslims into concentration camps. And Russia arrests every journalist that doesn't say exactly what they want. But look at you guys. You guys are democracy and you can't get the act together. And it's true. We can't get the act together, but you know why? Because the foundation of the West, the foundation of what you consider secular society, started with religion. The original thinkers of the West, the founders of what we consider our lifestyle, liberty, they based their liberty ideas based on the Bible. The founding fathers of the United States were all religious people. They believed in the concepts of the Torah. Kent Spira has an incredible book where he shows that so much of what we consider common sense ideas actually came from Judaism, came from religion, through Christianity sometimes, but ultimately it started at Sinai, and Sinai changed the world. Ideas like freedom, liberty, pursuit of happiness, equal rights. Who says there's equal rights? Who says that the white man and the black woman and the China transgender all have equal rights? Says who? I feel that way? No, feelings don't count for anything. Religion says that way. It says each and every one of us is created in the image of God, and God does not have a color. And God is not Caucasian, and he's not any other color. He's everything, and it's not even a he. It's a he, she, it's it. It's God. It's essence. And that idea has transformed the world. But now we forget why we believe in equal rights. Or what you see right now going on a lot in America and other places is equal rights depending for who? Not for Jews. See, because if you say something racist, then the world will knock you down. But if you say something anti-Semitic, there's barely a voice. Why? Because the Jews are so powerful. Or you could say anything about Israel, the vilest things, and you're still not considered a hater because you're just disagreeing with their policies. But if you talk like that about any other country, then that's a problem. Why? Where does that come from? Where does it come from that you have a world in which people believe in human rights and they're extreme about it, and at the same time, they won't allow the right of a Jew or of a conservative, or the conservative won't allow the right of a liberal, because ultimately it boils down to the same thing. There is no society without a moral code. You cannot raise your kids without a moral code. Some people are successful. I've said this before. I said there's many individual atheists who are incredible people, but atheism as a philosophy can never build a society. And every single atheist ideology on a macro level has ended in destruction. Whether it was fascism, whether it was communism, it ended with tremendous amount of death. Atheism does not work as a global, in other words, to force everybody to stop believing. And for that to be the ideology of the society doesn't work. It works for individuals, but it doesn't work on a societal level. Society level, we need moral code, and it cannot come from the government, because then the government becomes dictatorship. It has to be from society itself, where you and I self-regulate, where you and I figure out a system. We adopt a way of life that gives us boundaries. You think, and I think, we're giving our kids an incredible gift by giving them an education. The world's your oyster, my friend. My daughter, my son, go out. Look, you've gotten 8 distinctions, 10 distinctions. Now go out and make the world. But what do they have? They have freedom. They have access to freedom, access to wealth, access to pleasure. That's what they have with their degree. They don't have the world their oyster. They don't have all opportunities because they don't know where they're going. Let me ask you a question. If you're sitting on the ocean and you don't have a compass and you don't know if you're north, south, east, or west, you have no idea what direction you're facing. And you could go in any direction. Are you free or are you lost? You're lost. You're not free. Freedom is you know where you're going on the boat and you do it your way. Fine, but at least you know which direction you're going. Otherwise, you're lost. Loss isn't free. Freedom comes with responsibility. Loss is just no responsibility. I'm all over the place. So we're sending our child out at 18, 19 into the world. What do they have? Do they have a moral code that will help them avoid falling into unethical places? A moral code that will make sure that they're honest in whatever business they go into, that they respect their spouse, that they respect the other gender, that they respect fellow human beings, that they don't give in to temptation, that they have the ability to be stronger than their impulses. That's the stuff you need in life now. There's no other way. There's no other way for each and every one of us to live without a moral code. We need that. We need the ability and we need the gift. What happened to the Jewish people when they lived in the time of the temple and the temple was destroyed is God gave them incredible liberty. They lived in their own land. They were the government in their own land. Like the Israeli state today, 2,000 years ago. Autonomy. Well, then eventually we negotiated with the Romans and we went under the Romans and under the Greeks, under this, under that. But technically we were able to chart our own destiny. Liot am chavshi b'artzeinu, to be free in our land. What was the problem? We were free, but we didn't have religion. We didn't have a moral code. We fought each other. We didn't have respect of speech. We cursed each other out. You read the stories. You could go and read on the various Jewish websites the story of the destruction of the Second Temple and see the corruption, the anarchy, the absolute chaos going on within the Jewish community. And you think to yourself, Liyotam chavshi b'artzeinu, to be free in our land is part one. But what about part two? Free of what? Free of tyranny, yes. But free of religion? Free of morality? Free of a moral code? Free of God? Free of what? Sometimes I look at Israel, and I'm a huge Zionist in the literal sense of the word. It's God's land. God gave it to us. It's our holy space, each and every ounce of it. I'm what you would call right-wing, but I'm not, because I don't go to any politics. I don't believe we're allowed to give away one piece of land, because you cannot negotiate God's land with anybody. It's the Jewish homeland, without a question, without a shadow of a doubt. But I look at the society they're building right there, and I sometimes wonder, how long is it going to last without miracles? I'm talking simply straight out logical. Having studied Jewish history, having seen the mistakes we make, and then unfortunately seeing it being repeated again, how long does it last? Not before the enemy takes us over. I don't lose sleep from Iran, even from the terrorists. It's heartbreaking every time they do something. What makes me lose sleep is, what if we self-destruct? Anti-Semitism is on the rise today, no question about it. And it's forcing very, very difficult questions. Jewish kids are asking questions that we never thought Jewish kids would ask. Why do people hate us? Why are rappers telling us we're greedy when I'm just a regular kid? Well, what will you answer them? What does it mean to be a Jew? Why does the world hate us? I don't think we have a good reason. But one thing we know, what Hitler said, that Jews are the conscience of the world. And if we don't want the world to have a conscience, a guilt, take away the Jew. In other words, a Jew is Judaism. And Jew comes and reminds the world what's right and what's wrong. Whether they're religious or not, they have their moral code that goes back to Sinai. And they teach it and they believe in it. And the world can't stand that, some people. But as you embark on a conversation with your child, and hopefully a free conversation where your child could say anything they want because we believe in freedom of speech, I think it's important that we think about what it means to be a Jew. What is a Jew without Judaism? They're obviously 100% Jewish and they're beautiful. But ultimately, can Jews survive without Judaism? All statistics show that Jews without Judaism will be a thing of the past in 30 years' time. They're just not because they're going to get killed, heaven forbid, but because they're going to self-assimilate. And it's again just going to be the Orthodox, which for me is not a gift. It doesn't make me feel good to hear that. That's ridiculous. There's so many beautiful Jews, Orthodox or not. But the fact is, as again, until people believe in God and it's real and it affects their lifestyle, it doesn't last. It doesn't perpetuate from generation to generation. It doesn't work, even if it feels good. I've said many times, the South African Jew, the incredible South African Jew, is soon going to become obsolete. And their child will either go to the right or to the left. And that middle South African Jew is slowly but surely disappearing. It's gone down hugely in the last 30 years. In 1990, it was up to 80% of the Jewish population here. These days, it's 40%, and mostly of a certain age and older. It's getting smaller because the human being doesn't survive as a society for that long without making a decision right or left. It lasted, and South Africa is a unique experiment unlike anywhere in the world. It lasted for over 100 years. And it's amazing. It really is. But I would think, and we've discussed this before in our forum face-to-face, I believe it's the last generation of it. Our kids are not going to be like that. I don't think Linksfield Shul will be Linksfield Shul the way it is in 20 years' time. I think it won't be catering to a crowd. You might say that's sad, and it is, because the South African Jew was a gift to the world, somebody who's balanced, somebody who has Judaism, but also part of the world. There's no criticism in anything I'm saying about the community. All I'm saying is it doesn't last. Statistically, and we've seen it in this country the last 30 years, with the rise of intermarriage, with the rise of assimilation, and people going to the right and becoming religious. So we threw a lot of thoughts today. We spoke about liberty. We spoke about freedom of speech. We spoke about a lot of stuff. And some of the stuff might have been controversial. Some of the stuff might have been, yeah, I agree. And some of the stuff you totally disagree. And that's fine. Because my thoughts on freedom of speech are that, yes, countries should have freedom of speech, but with no right to ever attack a person for something they are. You could discuss ideas, and even then you should do it respectfully. But if any idea becomes about, I hate somebody else, that's not an idea, that's hatred. In other words, feel free to disagree with me, but don't make it about the person. That's freedom of speech. Share your opinions. Say that was nonsense or that was the best year you ever had, either or somewhere in between. Balance. But never make it about the person. And unfortunately, I think that's where the world is going mad. It's all about hating people for their ideologies instead of discussing ideologies on their own merit. There's no room for hatred in our world. As Jews, we know what hatred did. It took our temple away 1950 years ago, and we still don't have it back. It's not a great situation. So l'chaim, that we remember where unity comes from. It comes from respect. It comes from a gift and a mixture of liberty, freedom, at the same time responsibility. Responsibility comes from a moral code, and that moral code comes from Torah. It comes from knowing that there's a God who created a manual, and the same God who created you and me created a manual for us how to live. And the mandate is upon us to live that lifestyle, to live an ethical, moral, decent lifestyle. That is the call for each and every one of us, nothing less. God created the product, me. He created the manual, the Torah. And if I take the gift of freedom and democracy and liberty that we have in our time that our ancestors didn't have, and I put it together with a strong moral code, then I'm on a beautiful ocean, in a beautiful boat, heading north, knowing exactly where I'm going, and I can enjoy the ride. Shkoyach, everybody. Thank you so much. And I hope you gain